Hello and welcome back to the Secular Homeschool Revolution. I am your host, Ashley. Welcome to my podcast. I am so glad that you're here. This is a podcast where we are secular, progressive homeschoolers who are trying to build community and navigate this conservative world of education and homeschooling and changing the narrative. So I'm glad we're doing this work together. On today's episode, we are going to talk about how we can dismantle white dominant culture in our homeschooling journeys. If you've been here before, you know the flow of my show. I usually introduce my topic, and then I like to talk about just, short previews of my life. And then I get into, and I'd like to update you guys on my podcast progress because this is some work and I'm glad I get to share it with you guys just so you guys can go with me on the journey. So let me get into a life update. And I do want to work on getting more vulnerable in my life updates because as a mother, as a wife, as a woman, as a homeschooling parent, life is heavy sometimes. Life is hard. And it's hard AF. Let's put that out there. If you know me in real life, man, dropping the F-bomb is what I love to do. I curse like a sailor. I'm not going to do that on here. I know it doesn't always sound good, but I enjoy cursing if you want to know some more information about me. But I do want to work on becoming more vulnerable in this space because I never want to come off like I have it all together, because homeschooling has definitely humbled me. I've had a whole lot of missteps and a whole lot of time to reflect. And I just don't have it all together. And even when I think I do, I have multiple kids, multiple ages, multiple learning styles, and they like to come back and tell me I don't have it figured out. So yeah, I never want to come off like I have everything together because I absolutely don't, but I also want to share the things that I've kind of navigated through. And I think that's what I hope you guys find relatable about me. I know I have received DMs, on my new Instagram page that's been active for almost 10 days. I have 71 followers. That's a whole other journey of me trying to be a social media homeschooling, secular progressive homeschooling influencer. I'm trying to follow other secular homeschool pages. And I try to thumb through it to see if they're pretty progressive. It was definitely easier this month because of people posting pride posts, and so that made it easier. But there's a couple of reasons. I want my algorithm to be secular, progressive homeschoolers. I want to see how other people are doing their content. I want to know about other secular podcasts just to listen and learn and grow. But as I'm thumbing through social media and the homeschoolers, content creators, that I don't ever want to be picture perfect. And a lot of that stuff looks picture perfect and overwhelming in the sense that, I don't know, maybe it's me and the way I'm looking at it, or maybe insecurity I have, but it says to me if I don't have the perfect aesthetic and the well-dressed kids and the expensive homeschooling room with all of the expensive curriculum and manipulatives, it makes it look like homeschooling is not attainable. And I want to find content creators that are more realistic for me, I don't know. So I was just looking through that and I was like, what kind of social media homeschooler person for my podcast do I want to be? And last week I told you guys I'm making a lot of graphics and we're on summer mode. And also with us being on summer mode, we were supposed to try to do the year-round schooling, which we are, but we're taking an extended break because Parker, my oldest, is going to have surgery. And it's a pretty big surgery for her legs. So we are going to get back to it hopefully around July, but we'll see how it goes. We'll play it by ear. But I'm definitely using this time every day. I've set aside an hour where I'm planning for what it'll look like when we start back. I like to create these binders with, all of their information, all of their subjects and like their little planners so they know what to expect. So that's what I'm working on and updating their planners. And I could do an episode on what that looks like, and I could post pictures on my Instagram. We'll see if I can post some really nice pictures, or you know what, you guys are just gonna get what I got. Because I don't want to focus on perfectionism, because perfectionism is a part of white dominant culture, which we're going to get into. So I gave you really a life update. It's just been hot, and we've been doing like a weekly event with our co-op. I am proud of our co-op. I'm always proud of our co-op, but it is amazing to see how far we've come. So on my personal Facebook page, I found a picture of our group last summer at the skating rink, and there was like 6 of them, and a couple of them were friends that weren't even really in our co-op. Like, our co-op kids brought a couple of friends. So basically at the root of the picture, it was like 6 kids that were authentically from our For the Culture co-op. And it looked a little lonely. And then we had a skating rink meetup this week. And on our Facebook, we had 37 families RSVP, right? And we had a group picture of like 30 plus kids. And then that didn't include the kids that left early, the kids that didn't want to get off the skating rink, or the kids that were getting a snack. So apologize for the friends that didn't make it in our picture. But it was a beautiful sight to see. And then an even cooler thing happened. One of the moms shared that her and another mom in our co-op were having a conversation about the culture of our co-op. And this has been a space that is predominantly ran by women, and it has been very low drama. And not that there hasn't been drama, and I don't even think it's been huge drama, but we have been really trying to encourage a positive culture in our community. And if something comes up, please address it with them. And if it's a thing between kids, please address it with the parents so that the kids can see us modeling healthy communication and working through conflict. So even when there has been small, surprises of a little bit of drama, we don't have a culture of gossiping. And while we were really working hard for that, it it's nice for other people in our community to see that. And I think it is what one of the moms said, is like, we all value the same thing of like acceptance and respect, and it really shows in our community. So that was some really good opportunities to just sit back and think, wow, this labor of love is definitely worth it, not only for our kids but the parents as well. So I was very appreciative. And my Kari, my 7-year-old, started volleyball, and she starts ballet folklorico this week. Oh, Parker went to a camp with a local community college, and they were partnered with the Science Museum. She made it to day 1, and she didn't want to go back because of all the classes they were offering. She had done a lot of the things. So they were building a rocket, a bottle rocket, and she's done that a couple times. But we have some really cool local classes with the Northside ISD Community Center. They offer homeschool classes, and my kids, we didn't make it out this year And I think a lot of it too is because I was working and I was just tired. But Miss Shelley runs the best science classes. So if you're listening from San Antonio, look up the homeschool classes, the Northside ISD. So Parker built like a 4 foot rocket ship with Miss Shelley's class. So a bottle rocket wasn't that exciting to her. And then our co op offered CSI classes that were really fun. And so they were offering a CSI class that focused on like DNA, fingerprinting. So it was a lot of stuff she's done. And they were going to get into chemistry, and we really haven't touched on chemistry, but it was going to be a lot of textbook stuff, and I thought that would be a good opportunity for her to learn. But since she was having her surgery, I just was like, you know what? Let's go with what you want to go, because that mom guilt is heavy. Oh, y'all, and the surgery is the day after her birthday. So I'm like, you know what? If you don't want to do it, it's not fun. We'll find some other fun stuff to do. So, anyway. Oh, okay. So, podcast. So, my podcast is, I'm going to figure out how to add a sound, is officially, drum rolls, over 100 listeners. Again, thank you, thank you, thank you. If you've listened to the podcast and you shared it, I also got mentioned again in the secular decolonizing Facebook group for homeschoolers. That was really nice. And I mean, one person I knew, and the other person I didn't know, which is someone who is recently following my YouTube channel. So that's amazing. Yeah, my YouTube channel only has 6 followers or 6 subscribers. So I'll work on it. I joined a Facebook group for podcasters, and everyone said YouTube is the wave of podcasting. So I don't know how to increase my subscribers there. I haven't watched enough videos to know yet. But I know it was said, and a lot of people liked it. So we'll see how I can grow my YouTube channel. But again, if you like my content, leave a review. If you have beef with my content, slide me a DM. I'm open for growth in that way. Constructive criticism is cool. But also share it if you know of someone who's thinking about homeschooling or is looking for a community. Let's build it. All right, let's get into our topic of the day. Um, how white dominant culture, how we can how we can challenge white dominant culture in our homeschooling journey. All right, so let's first unpack what white dominant culture even means. It's more than about skin color, it's about the norms and values that prioritize white perspectives. It was birthed out of the white middle class perspective, and it marginalizes BIPOC voices. It shapes our society, our media, how we see ourselves, how we see each other, and it goes, it's not really named. When an institution is opening up, they don't go and look up, these are white dominant culture norms. Like, this is something that's just been ingrained and instilled in our society. And so a lot of times it goes unnamed and it goes unchecked, and it's not even necessarily adopted by the people of color. It is what has became the dominant voice of American society. So there are many concepts of white dominant culture, and we are just going to talk about a few today, and we can do follow-up episodes breaking down other concepts of white dominant culture. But for this episode, we are going to talk about the idea of either or thinking. We're going to talk about empathy and intersectionality, um, sense of urgency, curriculum, and open conflict, like the fear of open conflict. So, the first norm or segment we're going to break down of white dominant culture is the idea of either or thinking. And this basically means that you see things in black and white only. There's no room for gray areas or multiple perspectives. And this mindset is really harmful to BIPOC communities because it dismisses their experiences and their histories. So instead of acknowledging that there are many ways to understand and interpret the world, either or thinking forces everything into these narrow tunnel vision categories. And it completely erases the nuances and complexities that are so important to just fully understand and respect different cultures, backgrounds, stories, and you don't honor who they are and where they come from when you have such limited thinking. Next, let's talk about sustainable timelines versus sense of urgency. So, another aspect of white dominant culture is the sense of urgency. Um, and it's always this feeling, the pressure to get things done quickly. While it's great to have goals and deadlines, I think this often leads to burnout and unrealistic expectations. So instead, we need to focus on creating sustainable timelines for our homeschooling schedules because this approach not only can reduce stress, but it also sets a healthier, more balanced example for our kids. And when I was thinking about the sustainable timeline versus the sense of urgency, I used to work for a charter school, and that was everything, a sense of urgency. And there was no, it wasn't healthy because, for our job, for lessons and engagement and meeting goals, there was a strong sense of urgency. And then we also put that pressure onto our kids. And I remember seeing kids gain anxiety from like the first day of school to like when it was getting closer to testing. And it was like, what was it? I forgot the name of the like get smarter faster method. I think that's what it was called. And it was very like drill and kill stress. And it was supposed to push us and push the kids to meet their goals. And that's just unhealthy. And so when we're homeschooling, we do have a little bit more control of our homeschooling schedule, and we can play with our timeline. We're trying to finish curriculum. We can expand our year, or you can go year round. But yeah, it's definitely worth doing, showing our kids a more healthier example on how to balance your day and your time. I feel like this one's pretty, I don't know, I think maybe because of who I am and my circle, but I was like, I feel like this one's probably well known or expected. Um, I call it the colonizer curriculum versus an inclusive curriculum. So, traditional education, it relies on curriculum being centered around the European perspective, the white perspective. And this overlooks any contributions and histories of the BIPOC community. And you guys, I actually, again, another mention to the charter school, we had the social studies books that stated Black people were indentured servants. And I saw it before I knew our district had those books. I saw it circulating as like a social media Facebook meme. And I was like, wow, that's really messed up. And then to be told these are the books that we have, um, was mind blowing. And it was kind of like one of those things where, what are you going to do? Are you going to sit here and not say anything, or you're going to say something? Another teacher from another campus ended up. She was an amazing teacher. She really cared about the kids, and she rallied for the books to be not used. And so I definitely supported her, and it was some fear of like retaliation in that sense, because everything boils down to dollars, right? And the district just spent all of this money on these new textbooks, and most of the teachers rallied around to protest it. And so like we used a different, I think we ended up using the text from the year before, but it is, whenever you find yourself in those situations, you're like, am I going to be silent, or I'm going to say something? But again, us as homeschoolers, we do have the unique opportunity to diversify our curriculum. We can include stories and achievements and perspectives from a wide range of cultures and backgrounds. And that does give our kids more holistic and an inclusive education. Also, we were watching the news, and there was a man who I believe was 89 or 90, and it's the anniversary of the D-Day. And so my kids asked about it, and this man, he had a very Latino sounding last name. It was like Rodriguez or something, but he was very Latino sounding. And he got flown over to Germany for a, I guess, anniversary of D-Day type thing. And so that led us down this rabbit hole of this man is on stage crying and definitely sharing, his sentiments about everything that he saw and the friends that he lost. And he has this very big, he has American flag pin on his hat. And he ended up working at a local Air Force base for 40 years. And what was his authentic experience as being a man of color in the war? Like, we've heard the perspectives of what happened to the Tuskegee Airmen and soldiers, black soldiers, and how they were treated, but we don't often get the voice of brown soldiers, brown veterans in that way. And now my mom is a Latina, and she is a veteran. And while she's very proud of her military service, and I am very proud of her military service, it was different for her as a woman of color as opposed to a white woman in the same role for her. And she even expressed that it got difficult once she married my father, who was a black man. And so so we started researching what a brown experience was in the military for D-Day. And it was disheartening. So again, that's including different voices and perspectives in history. And so I know at one point we traditionally just were going through I can't even remember the basic history curriculum. And then we would go and do a deep dive of what was the brown and black perspective and voices at that time. So you may have to do a little bit of work, but I definitely think it's worth it so that you could offer your kid an inclusive education. All right, so the next concept of white dominant culture we're going to talk about is addressing fear of open conflict and the right to comfort. So, white dominant culture tends to value politeness over honesty, and that is avoiding open conflict at all costs. Do you guys remember, or I'm sure, especially if you're here in the South, and it's usually a meme of like a white woman with like big hair, like Southern belle, big hair. And when she hears something, and I feel like the meme is usually addressed to somebody up north. I don't know, but they'll say, "Oh, bless their heart," or "Oh, bless your heart." That's them just coming up with a cute, cheeky phrase instead of just getting into the conflict because they disagree with someone and they just rather shut them up and say bless your heart, when there's other ways to understand and handle the situation. So I think that was interesting when I was doing research of different traits of white dominant culture, and I came to this and I was like, oh, bless their heart. So now we understand that's a phrase from white dominant culture. And when this leads to issues like white fragility, when you have open conflict, because, their feelings get hurt. And people get defensive when they're confronted with uncomfortable truths about race and privilege. And in our homeschooling journeys, we should encourage honest conversations and create a space where discomfort is seen as a necessary part of learning and growing. And especially of parents of kids of color, I think this definitely impacts us in the way that we parent, because we want to make sure our kids of color's voices don't get silenced, right? We want them to understand that you can have a conversation, and just because it's uncomfortable doesn't mean you shouldn't have it. Like, it takes courage, right? And they need to value their courage and these moments of learning because they're learning opportunities. And I think if we, and right, so if we're having open conversations with our kids and there's some type of disagreement, conflict, and we had a set expectation, but they did their own thing, I think it is worth saying, okay, well, you knew this is where I was at. You chose to do that. Give them a space to be honest, right? And it's definitely like we have to honor our word when we're like, be honest. Telling the truth will get you in way less trouble. We have to honor that part. Even when they're true, they actually are honest. And we're like, what? It'll drive us crazy. But we have to honor, well, they were being truthful, right? And then we have to navigate empathy and understanding and say, well, I do understand your thought process behind it, but this was the expectation. And you can see if there was some gray area there, but we want them to feel empowered to use their voice, even if it's going to cause some type of conflict. We want to build that courage in them. And we are constantly having to learn from them. And when we're learning from them, we're learning about ourselves. So yeah, we want to raise strong, rooted kids, and we have to teach them how to address open conflict and not just be polite, because politeness doesn't get us anywhere. Again, so let's do just a quick overview of a few steps on how we can dismantle white dominant culture in our homeschooling practice. So, again, if we're looking at curriculum, we can diversify our curriculum. We can include materials and resources that highlight BIPOC histories, cultures, and contributions. Books and documentaries and online resources are incredibly helpful. Also, too, you can encourage critical thinking. Teach your kids to question and analyze information that they receive and encourage them to consider multiple perspectives and understandings to get the concept, not the concept, the context behind different viewpoints so they're not stuck in this very like tunnel black and white vision, that there are sometimes gray areas. Whether you understand it or not, it's your job to like dig to figure that out. Also, 3, foster open dialogue. Create a safe space for honest conversations about race and privilege and equality. Encourage your kids to express their thoughts and feelings, and be ready to navigate uncomfortable topics with them. And one other thing I do want to say is model empathy and intersectionality, because it incorporates discussions that will model the real world. When we're, I think I said that wrong. Let me start over. So it's a good idea to model empathy and intersectionality when we're trying to dismantle white dominant culture, because we want them to be able to build connections between different forms of oppression and conflict. And so I also want to give a shout out to Kimberly Crenshaw. You know, she is the person who termed who termed y'all. It is 12:59 a.m. I'm so sorry again, but white dominant culture idolizes perfectionism. So you guys are just gonna have to go with my errors right now. She coined the term intersectionality, and it's basically different social identities like race, gender, sexuality, and class. And it helps you understand unique experiences of oppression and privilege. And so when we're having these conversations, we definitely are helping our kids understand that we should respect different perspectives and experiences. And it's about moving from a mindset of competition to one that's more of a collaboration. And I know I didn't really touch on it earlier, but I had it in my notes, and I think I want to talk about it more. I want to implement it more because I think it's so important to be able to connect different point of views and layer it and model empathy so that our kids, it'll become a norm for them. And that is a huge way to dismantle white dominant culture. Okay, so we'll revisit because there's so many different norms of white dominant culture. Um, I have like this ongoing Google Doc. It goes from like power hoarding to competition to paternalism to superiority of the written word, comprehensiveness, transactional relationships, transactional goals, defensiveness, progress is bigger and more, overworking, perfectionism, skeptical management, white mediocrity, equity washing, changing the subject away from the role of race. So there are a lot of white dominant cultural norms that we can go over and expand on in this episode. I am constantly growing and learning myself, and so I'm excited to share. And my husband does the anti-racist diversity, equity, and inclusion work. So these are definitely conversations that are being had in our house and how we can create a homeschooling environment for our kids. And so I'm happy to share the things that we incorporate in our house with you all because, again, we're growing a community and we're learning from each other. And if you have norms that you are dismantling or actively working on to dismantle in your homeschooling journey, please share them in my comments, or you can send me a DM on my Instagram, secular underscore homeschool underscore revolution. Um, and I would love to hear from you. And so I do want you guys to remember that dismantling white dominant culture and education is a continuous journey, but with intentionality and effort, we can create a more inclusive and equitable learning environment for our kids. And I also want to give you guys some notes. So, uh, I I really like the book Stamped from the Beginning. Um, and another good book is I Know Our Kids Don't. Let's see. Okay, I do want you guys to remember that working to dismantle white dominant culture and education is a continuous journey. And if we're intentional and a whole lot of effort, we can create a more inclusive and equitable environment for our kids. And there are a couple of books I do want to share with you guys before we end this episode. Um, I think these books are powerful resources that can help us dismantle racism in our homeschooling journey. Stamped from the Beginning by Ibram X. Kendi. This book traces the history of racist ideas in America, and it shows how they have evolved and were able to persist throughout time. And I think it's a good read for you to be able to understand the roots of systemic racism and how it has shaped our society. The next one is, and I know we have homeschooling kids, so the next, but it's this book is just it helps understand like racial identity, and it's Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Together in the Cafeteria by Beverly Daniel Tatum. This book, let me see. Let me get my words together. I have notes, but I always go off my notes. Okay, so this book unpacks why racial segregation happens. And to dismantle racism, we have to understand why the segregation happens, even among kids. And this book does a good job of giving us insight on how we can create an inclusive environment where all kids feel valued. And I think this is especially important if you are an ally and you are going into spaces of people of color, um, so that you can contribute and not take from the community. And even when you're on your own journey and you're not in a space of kids of color, you are looking out for what that looks like in different environments, because the more you know, the more you learn, the more you're aware of things. And this other book was like, I think it was during COVID, it became like, no, it was before COVID. The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander. This has been a few years since I've read this book, but it discusses mass incarceration in the U.S., and it reveals how the criminal justice system disproportionately targets Black and brown communities. And again, the U.S. criminal justice system is what white dominant culture is. It has systemic racism built into it. And this really challenges us to wake up and address discriminatory policies and advocate for justice and equality. And when by engaging with these books, we are equipping ourselves with knowledge and perspectives to actively combat racism, white dominant culture, and in our own homes, create a more inclusive homeschooling environment. A website you can also check out is Learning for Justice. It is www.learningforjustice.org. They have a lot of great resources and frameworks to build out lessons, and they also have like a library of books that you can view ebooks. So that's a really good website. And oh, a podcast that I just got into is Teaching Hard History, and it's also associated with the Learning Justice. Um, so that one's good. And of course, the Intersectionality Matters with Kimberly Crenshaw. And Code Switch. Code Switch is so good too. So those are some podcasts if you are a podcast person to check out. But I definitely I want to always try to include more resources. I think I do try to include resources on every episode, but these are things that I'm coming across or I've read or have been shared with me and that I have found of value for my homeschooling journey. So I always want to pass on the information because we are a community that believes in collaboration. And please always reach out to me on my Instagram if you have any valuable resources to share. I'm always looking for an opportunity to grow. Um, Also, don't forget to subscribe. And also, if you can, subscribe to my YouTube channel. I have 7 subscribers now. And is there anything else? No, I think that is wrapping up today's episode. So I do thank you for tuning in to the Secular Homeschool Revolution. I am your host, Ashley. And until next time, please keep questioning, keep learning, keep revolutionizing your homeschool education.